Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host, covering information from Without Conscience, The Disturbing World of the Psychopaths Among Us by Robert Hare. Previously, I was covering the fact that the language of these creatures may be bilateral, which means it's controlled by both sides of the brain, continuing in the section of his book called Words from an Overcoat Pocket, below the emotional poverty line. It is possible that other brain processes normally controlled by one hemisphere are also under bilateral control, although in most people the right side of the brain plays the most central role in emotion. Recent laboratory evidence indicates that in these creatures, neither side of the brain is proficient in the processes of emotion. Why this is so is still a mystery, but an intriguing implication is that the brain processes that control the psychopath's emotions are divided and unfocused, resulting in a shallow and colorless emotional life. Ted Bundy may have been indignant when someone referred to him as an emotional robot with nothing inside.
"Boy, how far off can he be?"
said Bundy.
"If they think I have no emotional life, they're wrong. Absolutely wrong. It's a very real one and a full one."
However, it's abundantly clear from his other comments and the shallow explanations for his murderous behavior that the description is apt. Like all psychopaths, Bundy had only a vague comprehension of the extent of his emotional poverty. A lot of people are attracted to pop psych movements that emphasize a search for self-understanding. They search for you to get in touch with your feelings. For psychopaths, the exercise, like the search for the Holy Grail, is doomed to failure. In the final analysis, their self-image is defined more by possessions and other visible signs of success and power than it is by love, insight, and compassion, which are abstractions and have little inherent meaning to these creatures. And then Hare tells us to watch their hands. Watch the way somebody talks to you moves their hands. Do they move infrequently, or do they fly all over the place? Do hand gestures help you understand what's being said to you? Some do, for they provide visual enhancement to the speaker's words. Like if you say, "Her heart was really big." However, most language-related hand gestures convey no information whatsoever to the listener. Empty hand gestures, which are called beats, are small, rapid hand movements that occur only during speech or pauses in speech, but are not really part of the storyline. Like other gestures and body movements, they're often part of the show that the speaker puts on, or they are a reflection of a culturally based style of communication. Beats occur, though, for other reasons as well. Many people use these hand gestures while they're on the phone. The listener doesn't see them, but their hands are flipping all over the place. So why does the speaker do it? The answer may be related to evidence that the brain centers that control speech also control hand gestures that are made during speech. In some unknown way, possibly by increasing overall activity in these centers, beats seem to facilitate speech. They help us to put our thoughts and feelings into words. If this sounds weird, watch the frantic hand movements that somebody makes next time it has trouble finding a word. Or make a point of not using your hands when you speak. Is there an increase in the number of hesitations, pauses, and stumbles in your speech? If you speak more than one language, you'll probably make a lot more beat gestures when speaking in your second language than when speaking in your native language. In some cases, a high rate of beat gestures appears to reflect difficulty in converting thoughts and feelings into speech. Beats may also tell us something about the size of thought units or mental packages that underlie speech. A thought unit can vary from something very small, something very simple and isolated, a single idea, a single word or phrase, a sentence, to something larger and much more complex. Groups of ideas, sentences, or complete storylines. The ideas, phrases, words, and sentences that comprise large thought units are likely to be well integrated, tied together in some meaningful, consistent, or logical fashion to form a script. Beats appear to mark off these thought units. The greater number of beats, the smaller the units. Recent evidence suggests that Psychopaths use more beats than regular people do, particularly when they're talking about things generally considered to be emotional. For example, describing the way they feel about family members and other loved ones. We might infer two things from this evidence. Like a tourist using high school French to ask directions in Paris, these psychopath creatures have trouble putting into words emotional ideas because they're vague and poorly understood. In this sense, the idea of emotion is like a second language to these creatures. Psychopaths' thoughts and ideas are organized into rather small mental packages and readily moved around. This can be a distinct advantage when it comes to lying. As psychologist Paul Ekman pointed out, skilled liars are able to break down ideas, concepts, and language into basic components and then recombine them in a variety of ways, almost as if they were playing a game of Scrabble. But in doing so, the psychopath endangers its overall script. It may lose its unifying structure or become less coherent and integrated than if it were dealing in a large thought unit. For this reason, the competent liar often uses a thin truth line to help keep track of what it says and to ensure that the story appears consistent to the listener. The most mischievous liars are the ones who keep sliding on the verge of truth. Next, Dr. Hare tells us in the heading, A Fragmented Truth Line, although these creatures lie a lot, they're not really the skilled liars that we oftentimes make them out to be. As we've covered in previous video, these creatures have a speech that's full of inconsistent and contradictory statements. These creatures may play mental Scrabble, but they sometimes do it badly because they fail to integrate the pieces into a coherent whole. Their truth line is fragmented and patchy at best, such as considering the inmate who previously said it had never been violent, but it had to kill somebody. We understand this as a contradictory statement because we treat it as a single thought unit. However, the inmate may have been dealing with two independent thought units. I never committed a violent offense, and I once killed somebody. Most of us are able to combine ideas so that they are consistent with some underlying theme. But these creatures seem to have difficulty doing this. This helps to explain the wild inconsistencies and contradictions that frequently characterize their speech. It may also be the reason for their use of neologisms, combination of the basic components of words, syllables, and ways that seem logical to them but inappropriate for others. This situation is just like in a movie when one scene is shot under cloudy conditions and then the next scene, which supposedly takes place a few minutes later, is shot in brilliant sunlight. Obviously, the scenes were not shot at the same time, they were on different days, and the director failed to take this into account when putting them together. Some moviegoers, like some victims of these creatures, might not notice this discrepancy, particularly if they're engrossed in the action of the film. One other point about the way in which these creatures use language, their mental packages are not only small, but they're two-dimensional, devoid of emotional meaning. For most of us, the choice of words is determined by their dictionary meaning and their emotional connotation. But these creatures need not be so selective. Their words are unencumbered by emotional baggage and can be used in ways that seem weird to the rest of us. For example, the psychopath may see nothing wrong in saying to a lady,
I love you,
just after beating her up, or in telling somebody else,
I had to beat her up to keep her in line. She knows that I love her.
For most people, these two events would be logically and effectively incongruous. Consider the bizarre statement that was made by a man with a high score on the psychopathy checklist, who had served 3 years in jail for fraud and theft. He tricked his widowed mother into obtaining a $25,000 mortgage on her home, stole the money, and left her to pay off the debt from her meager income as a store clerk.
My mother's a great person, but I worry about her. I think she works too hard. I really care for that lady. I'm going to make things easier for her.
When asked about the money he'd stolen from her, he replied,
I've still got some of it stashed away, and when I get out, it's party time.
His expressions of concern for his mother were inconsistent not only with its documented behavior towards her, but also with his stated plans for the money. When this was pointed out to him, he said,
Well, yeah, I love my mother, but she's pretty old, and if I don't look out for myself, who's gonna?
In my own personal experience with these types of creatures, I have typically taken note of the inconsistencies in their speech patterns, and I have learned, as I've stated on many occasions, you can bring it up to them, you can present a perfectly logical assessment of what they've said versus what they've done, or any type of contradiction they've made, and you feel like you're speaking to a brick wall. You feel like you are not reaching the person because it's like so obvious to you. Like an example I made long ago was you've got a really funny joke that you've told all over the world, and every time you tell it, the whole theater erupts in laughter, yet you've got this person here and you're saying, oh, I've got this joke for you, and you tell it to them and their face is blank. It's that kind of feeling. You know that the joke is funny. In this case, you know that you've made a perfect point as far as contradiction, and it's like it's lost on these creatures. They just don't get it. Now, I don't know if they get it and they're pretending like they don't get it, or they just don't get it. But either way, it's not very fulfilling for you if you're the unfortunate person dealing with it. And many times this comes years into the relationship, and you feel really sickened because you're so far into it, invested so many things into this thing, only to realize you're dealing with a dud. And some of us are very thorough, and some of us build like the perfect case to point out, hey, look, this is inconsistent. I've found in a lot of cases when you bring it to that level, because you get sick of the gaslighting and you get sick of the statements that just tell you that you're wrong, you get them in a place where they can't escape. Like a car driving on the highway and the door's locked. And you say, look, by the way, I wanted to bring up this subject. Don't do it, because your argument could be perfectly sound, perfectly logical, and you bring it up to the creature, and the creature will, first they'll probably try to just tell you that you're wrong, and if you incorporate that, hey, you told me I was wrong, but I proved I wasn't wrong with this and this, they eventually get to the point where they switch, and they will typically say, well, it must make you feel good to insult me. Why do you have to put me down? And stuff like that, which is totally uncalled for and inappropriate, but they don't have any other defense. And if you find yourself dealing in that situation where you know what you figured is right, you're simply looking for this person who love-bombed you so wonderfully a few months or years ago to understand you like they did then, but it just doesn't happen. It seems if the criticism is about them, all bets are off, and whatever you say is wrong. You can't live that way and be happy. If you see this type of thing, the best thing to do is to escape as soon as possible.
I am the Narcopath.
Yes, I was listening to TJ's video from this book that I'm going to destroy the moment he's not looking. I have a hard time with part of it. The section he just covered. TJ, that jerk. He's got me locked up here, by the way. Yes, oh yes. He had the nerve to talk about being below the poverty line, talking about bilateral language. Well, bisexual is all I know. I don't know nothing about bilateral. He's trying to indicate that I say contradictory things. Well, I can't help it. That's just who I am. It has nothing to do with the brain hemispheres. Or does it? Maybe it does. If it does, well, that's just a gift I have. Nothing to be ashamed of. I'm just better. I get things I want. TJ doesn't get the things he wants, but I do. Why? Well, because I know how to lie and fake it, and I get it. Who cares if it doesn't last? For me, the thrill is getting it. And then I move on to something else. You should try to be a narcopath one day. It's great fun. Until the fun ends.
And then I've got to find more. And really, I don't know what this deal is about using the hands. I don't ever use my hands when I'm talking. I'm a genuine person.
I've been mistaken for a narcopath. Or so I'm going to try to convince TJ. I just don't move my hands. He thinks that means you might have narcopathic tendencies, and I just don't do it. I don't move my hands. He's just going to have to accept it. If he's using that as his criteria, maybe I can get myself out of here, because I don't do that. I've got a huge bank account, but I can't get to it because TJ's locked it up. He's taken control of my life. He thinks he owns me because he found out I scammed him. Well, he deserved it, even though he didn't do anything first. He deserved it. He just did. Face the facts. It's all there is to it. Hang on just a second. Hello? Who? So you've got my number. What's the deal? No. That is not my fault. She's the one who turned in the false police report. I had nothing to do with it. You've got to understand. Don't call her again until you get the facts right. No. I had nothing to do. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, I do know about that, but I don't know about any of the rest. Come on. Give me a break. All you need to do is go after her. Get her to admit to what she has done.
I have nothing to do with it. Do you understand? I have nothing to do with it. Don't call here again, you witch!
Sometimes I can't help but dream of a long-lost love. I fell in love with you before the second show. Your guitar, it sounds so weirdly, but you're not really here. It's just the radio. Don't remember you tell me love, baby. It's just because I get baby. Make the time, baby, oh, baby. I love you, I really do.
Yes, I am a reptilian shapeshifter, accepted. And you were in love with me. How does that make you feel?